well energized back again. We are up for the second session of the day, which is titled Under the Joint Initiative of Alliance for Rural Electrification, as well as the Green People's Energy. The name of this joint initiative is Paving the Way for Clean Energy Transition for Decentralized Renewable Energy, in short, PWCET series. Under it, the topic that we are going to cover today is on capacity building to support sustainable implementation of DRE solutions. And now to carry on with the proceedings, may I have the honor to invite the CEO of the Alliance for Rural Electrification, Mr. David Lecoq, on stage. David.
Thank you very much, Deepak, for your kind words and of introduction, and for indeed welcoming me to the stage. And dear participants, both in the room as well as online, so happy to have you with us today again at the OFF-GRID Expo here at Messe Augsburg, that we have the honor of supporting the organization of, together with our colleagues at Messe Augsburg, as well as with partnerships around for matchmaking with UNIDO-ITPO, and then of course today's session with the German initiative called the Grüne Bürgerenergie, also known as Green People's Energy. So today I think we can go to the next slide on the agenda, briefly outlining that. Next slide, please. Yeah, so there, well, you see my name is over there. Then we'll have a keynote, actually, all the way from the top of the GB initiative from Mrs. Bärbel Höhn, who is the special representative of BMZ for energy in Africa. After which we will have speaker interventions. So this will be stump PowerPoints, stump speeches by several of the panelists. Thank you very much, Deepak. That will be a good mix of particularly members of the DRE called Schneider Electric, whose VP is with us, from Millennium Engineers, also the CEO of SolarWorks, then the Deputy Mayor of Wildpolsried here in Germany, and last but not least, Laura Corcoran, Director at Aptec Africa. So that's going to be, let's say, what they're going to be presenting to you today, after which we'll have a panel discussion, where whether you're in the audience, you just raise your hand, and if you're online with us, you use the Slido option, and we'll have the questions on the screen here that we can then bring to this determinedly hybrid panel, because I'm standing here and pretty much most of our panelists are online. So this is definitely a first experience in that regard as well. Briefly, I can do it myself, you see. To the PWCET series, Deepak already kindly introduced it. So essentially the GBE ARE cooperation is called the Paving the Way for Clean Energy Transition with Decentralized Renewable Energy series. The idea of which is to promote public discourse on the clean energy transition in Africa. And the emphasis, and this is what I like so much about it, is on the aspect of community involvement to explore how citizens, so not just companies, not just public sector, but also the citizens themselves can initiate and drive DRE projects at a local level, and therewith contribute to the twin goals of both the energy transition as well as clean energy access. So there's a series of events, including this one, that are precisely on specific topics in this context. And this one will cover specifically the topic of capacity building in the local context to facilitate this project development. And so that's why we have invited really the key stakeholders for valuable contributions and even lessons learned. Because as we also see from ARE, all over the markets where our members and ourselves are active, the development of capacity in the electricity access world is obviously essential. It's a continuing challenge because, of course, you need to continually train and form new staff and new entrepreneurs. So it's really essential in providing energy to rural communities and enhance thereby the sustainable development also on the economic level. So therefore, the capacity building in the DRE sector, we have identified 3 different branches for that. Obviously, we have the private sector companies, which are federated under ARE and beyond in the sector. So there, it's really to empower their staff and their field personnel. That's what SolarWorks does, that's what Aptec Africa does, that's what a lot of our companies are doing. Clearly on the public sector, international organization, funders, we'll have training initiatives that we organize for local companies and communities. That's where we have our own master classes coming in. The CORE initiative is a very nice capacity building initiative we do with the International Copper Alliance, Rest for Africa, Microgrid Academy, and so on. Finally, last audience is the civil society organizations, where the advocacy efforts and the organizing of awareness programs to build that consciousness and build that knowledge base really is essential, because it's true that sometimes as a private sector it's easy to try and rush too fast, but we always, certainly with ARE, make a point of working as much as possible as we can with civil society, because that is so essential to our work, and they're also standing very closely within the communities. Before I pass on the floor to our distinguished speaker, Mr. Bebel-Heun, I also would like to announce at a very soft launch that we will have an upcoming publication that is called the Understanding the Clean Energy Transition with Community-Driven DRE Projects from Germany and Sub-Saharan Africa. So we'll have 3 German case studies and 9 African case studies from the GB-focused countries, which essentially will show the massive potential that, provided we have the right mix of ingredients on the policy front, on the financial front, on the leadership front, that those twin goals that I mentioned, energy access as well as energy transition, can be properly scaled up and delivered on. So don't let me take any more time. I am not sure how it works on the technical front, but if I could invite Mrs. Bebel-Heun for her keynote address, that would be delightful. Let me see if I can do that here. No. Yeah, so that's it from me. Can we go to the keynote speech? Please. It's a hybrid format, so everybody's still learning the ropes. So I hope you'll bear with us, but I'm sure you will. Certainly here in the live audience, you're here anyway, so I have the pleasure to have a captive audience.
Quick announcement, we're going to need some more seconds to bring Mrs. Bebel-Heun in, because we are experiencing some technical difficulties, but in the meantime we can talk a bit more about, or maybe have a dialogue about, the capacity building. David, if we are talking about this topic anyways, so far would you like to talk a little bit about ARA's experience about what capacity building has been, or how essential it has been for the off-grid sector, and what more can be done, or what kind of partnerships that can be forged in order to facilitate training on the ground and, let's say, lift up the cause? Yeah, no, thank you, Deepak, for that point. I think it's a big point, obviously, because, look, you can have the best technology, you can have ability to pay, willingness to pay, local economic activity, but you always will need people to actually build the system, to install the system, to maintain the system, so to ensure the longevity of it. And that's precisely the point of technical capacity building, also in the way that ARE is trying to put that up with training academies, including CORE and so on. There is another element to that, that also at ARE we are really putting the onus on, is the capacity building at the level of entrepreneurs, especially on building more bankable project proposals. So when you are, let's say, a startup, when you are a German Mittelstand company, and you are, as often can be the case, struggling to access the right type. It's not just about accessing finance, it's the right type of finance, patient capital, working capital. When you want to learn and boost your skills on that, it's highly recommended that we would warmly invite you to join these trainings, because what we do at ARE, being the business platform that we are, we bring in, let's say, experts from the field, also from the financial side. We have quite a lot of financier and investors within our membership, called the Financier Circle, under initiative with the African Development Bank and the Africa Desk that we have opened in that regard, where we provide hands-on training. So we will not write, obviously, the business plan on your behalf, and you are the company, that is your responsibility, but we will do, as we always do with ARE, everything in our power to help you along the way, to identify finance, to write that proposal, to find the partners, to connect with the citizens, also under this initiative with GBE,
So I think for me, maybe I'll stop here briefly. But I think that's definitely the essential part of that for us.
Indeed, very essential point. And also you touched upon all the small elements that ARA has been putting together like pieces of puzzle in order to impart such kind of training opportunities, or at least leveling the playing field to organize such training opportunities and capacity building initiatives. I think I heard some news from top of my head that we have the connection secured with Mrs. Hun. Can I invite our technical team to have her on the screen?
Wonderful.
I think there's
yes. Everything is working. Thank you.
Happy to see you with us. Thank you so much for being with us. Over to you.
Welcome, Mrs. Hun. I think this is my cue to get off the stage. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Great to join this meeting, and welcome to all the people who are joining this meeting too. I think we are talking about a very, very important issue. My name is Bärbel Höhn. I have been more than 30 years in politics as a minister in the biggest state of Germany, but also as member of Federal Parliament, German Bundestag in Berlin. And 4 years ago, Minister Müller asked me to be special representative of energy in Africa. And his ministry, this minister, Dr. Müller, he launched a program that is called, a bit of funny name, a Green People's Energy. And that means that it's a green energy for the people, or on the other side, we will put the production of energy in the hand of the people. And the program is that we see that half of the population in Africa have no access to electricity. And from these people who have no access to electricity, about 90% are living in rural areas. And that means we would like to install off-grid solutions. We would like to look for decentralized renewable energy solutions because we think we have to achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and we can do that, especially in rural areas, only with access to electricity, and that means off-grid solutions. And that is the program of the Green People's Energy. Yes, and inside this program, we are not only installing photovoltaic plants, but we are also looking for training, because that is one of the main issues to be successful in this program. And we are especially the Alliance of Rural Electrification to organize this webinar, because we would like to make an exchange of good ideas, what is going well in this direction and what not. I think it's so important to look for renewable energies, because we can overcome poverty and hunger. We can look for productive use. We can look for creating jobs and have a better situation in hospitals and, for example, in schools. And even renewables have a lot of other advantages, because renewables are very cheap. So that means if you are paying for diesel generator, it's very good to replace a diesel water pump by photovoltaic, because diesel is very costly. And on the other hand, sun and wind and biomass, it's for free in your country, but you have to pay a lot for diesel, for coal, for gas, or for oil, for fossil fuels, and you are more dependent if you look for these resources from other countries. So renewables, to build up renewables is really a good push for your economy, creating a lot of jobs. In Germany, for example, we created 350,000 jobs in the field of renewables, and we have only 30,000 jobs in the field of coal. That means we have really a perspective for young people. And if you are talking about national solutions, about the national grid, we can't expand it to the last village in some countries in Africa, because the distance is too far away and it's too expensive. And we see that especially the women have a good advantage when we are investing in renewables. But we have to involve the local population, because without the local population, we can't be successful. They must take more care of off-grid solutions, and that is why we have to look for special skillness of these people. We have to look for local entrepreneurs, and we have to debate these issues today. Capacity building. How can we support renewables? I visited in the last 4 years more than 10 countries in Africa, had an overview of the situation in these countries, about the electric market, about legislation in these countries, and can see what is going in a right direction and what is difficult in different countries. How can we support renewables? And I would like to mention 4 points. The first one, the technical components, the requirement must have a good standard. Because when we have poor standard, for example, for photovoltaic plants, we destroy the truth in solar technology. I saw a lot of shops at the side of the road where you can buy panels, but they have a bad quality. In some countries, we have something like an official agency that is looking for good quality of this off-grid solutions. And in these countries, you have a fund, you can get some grants, but you can only get these grants when you can fulfill this standards of quality of solar panels. That seems to me very important. And the second point I would like to mention is the training, the skills, because when we are developing this renewable energies in all these countries, we create a lot of jobs. But we need people who can fulfill this job, who can be employees. And that means we need something like a basic training. For example, for electricians, for technical experts, to build up this photovoltaic plants, to install them, to make them maintenance. And even, for example, in customer centers, we need a lot of people. And in some countries, even, for example, in Germany, I can see that young people would like to go to the university, make an academic degree, theoretical degree. At the end of the study, they noticed that they learned the wrong issues. So they can't find a job. They are jobless. But all these economies need people who have this knowledge of basic practical trainings. And I think in these countries, even, for example, in Germany, we have the same problem in Germany. We need a bit better understanding how important these basic professions are, to value the people who decided to work in this field, because without this knowledge, without the people who have the knowledge of that, the economy could not be the best one in developing in these countries. So we can see, when we don't have the knowledge, when we don't have the trained people in this sector, we will not be successful to build up renewables and help the people to overcome poverty and hunger. And the third point I would like to mention is financial models. So we need a mix of grants, support, loans, and private capital. That means public-private partnership. And that means building up local entrepreneurs with money from foreign countries, but also with support in the different countries we are working in. We will make the next webinar, we will make especially with this case. So go in detail with how to financing the building up of renewables. And we are a bit at the starting point, because in the past, only the big investments was featured. Big coal-fired plants, big grids, solutions, and so on. So we from Germany, especially in our Green People's Energy Program, we were looking with the KfW for more financial instruments for small solutions. For example, we supported the African Development Bank to give grants for off-grid solutions. And that is important, because we noticed without this off-grid solutions, we will not fulfill and will not reach or achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And the last point, but not least, is that we need political framework. We need a political will that the governments are interested to really support renewables. I saw in some countries that there is not the allowance to build up off-grid solutions. Or, for example, the tariff system is so maybe is going in the wrong direction that you are not able to make these investments and maybe get your invested money back. And that is a very important point because we need private capital. And if the private investors are not sure that they are getting their money back, I think they have a problem. That's why we really must debate with the government and must see in which countries do we have successful solutions, do we have a political will and not obstacles and barriers, and then maybe the other countries can see that it's really an advantage to go in this direction. So I'm very interested to hear from all the countries and also panelists about their experience and their good examples, because we have to learn from each other to be successful in this field. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Hearn, for your keynote address. Thank you so much. And we're back in the live here from Augsburg. So thank you so much, Mrs. Hearn, for your keynote address. I think you touched on really a lot of very important points out of policy framework, the financial framework, the capacity building, the need for technical standards. I also very much liked, and I'm sure the audience online and live noticed, the abundance of jobs that renewable energy creates. And certainly in times of COVID, the economic considerations of any initiatives are even more considered than before. Well, here, as we know already in Augsburg, and now also can broadcast into the world, that renewables just have the best value proposition, both at the project level as well as on the job creation level. So really thank you for your contributions and your nice words. And we, on behalf of DRE, I can certainly say are extremely proud to be working together with you for this webinar series, for the publication, and more to come, because there is indeed a lot to explore. Perhaps, if you allow me, we move over to our panel discussion. So Ms. Hearn will be in the background with us, and we will now turn to the intervention of 5 distinguished panelists, all of which are online. So this is first as a moderator with an empty set of chairs, but that is 2021, is it, for you? So in my order of the agenda, we first have Mr. Olivier Jacquet, who is the VP for all things access to energy, business development in Middle East, Africa, well, in the MEAS region, let's say in short, for Schneider Electric, a leading member of the Alliance for Rural Electrification. Then we will have Ms. Diana Mbogo, Managing Director at Millennium Engineers, followed by Mr. Felix Bolt, CEO of SolarWorks. I hope that he can connect virtually as well to share his experience. To have Mr. Günther Mögele, Deputy Mayor of Wilpolsried here in Germany, because that is also, as we say, we have German and African case studies. And then Ms. Laura Corcoran, Director of Business Development at Aptec Africa. So do we have the technical connection to Schneider Electric? The colleagues say we do. So let's hear from you, Mr. Jacquet. So happy to see you with us on stage. It's a huge screen, so the audience can see you very well. So thank you so much for being with us. And the floor is yours. Over to you. Merci d'être là.
Thank you very much, David, and I hope you can hear me well.
Perfect.
Super. So I'm very honored to be part of this panel and to be with you today. Before I start sharing my experience on capacity building, I wanted to take a little bit of time just describing the context in which a company like Schneider Electric, industrial international leader in energy efficiency, energy management, digital energy, how do we take part in this global move towards trying to achieve full access to energy worldwide by 2030, which is in line with the SDG number 7 from United Nations. So what is the access to energy at Schneider Electric? So I will try to move the slides as, yes, excellent. I see it's working. So basically, we started out this program in a very structured manner back in 2009. So it's been 12 years. We've been putting a consistent effort towards trying to help solve the dilemma of access to energy throughout the world. On the screen, you can see some basic numbers, and I'm sure most of you know about these numbers. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit going back and forth due to the lag. So basically, there is about 1 billion people not having any access at all to electricity in the world, which is 1 people out of 7. It's a huge number. And if you extend this to the people who have a very basic access, such as kerosene lamps or candles, this will go up to 3 billion people, which is not far from half of the people living on this planet. And not only this is a huge number, but also if you look into these 3 billion people, the average money they spend on kerosene, they spend on those lamps, candles, and any energy mean would represent 30% of their income. So I guess most of the room is based not only in emerging countries, but also developing countries. Let's imagine if you had to spend 30% of your expenses in energy. That would be very, very much of a shame. So we're trying we've been consistently trying to address this in the past 12 years, and I'm going to describe you a little bit how we did, where we are, and then I will focus on the capacity building. So next slide. I don't know if you can see it, David, on the screen.
Yes.
Yes. So basically, I think the first speaker did introduce very well that access to energy is triggering a lot of progress in terms of standard of living for the people who can benefit from this access to energy. Here you have 5 main examples of those between brackets segments that really is impacted. Health, of course, as soon as you can feed a dispensary or a small hospital, they will be able to store medicines, they will be able to have to run their machine to store the blood and so on. So the health service is improved. Economical development, of course, as soon as you electrify a rural area, then you have access to that energy. For example, people in agriculture can go a little bit higher the value chain, not only selling raw material, raw production, raw goods, but also to transform them. Then security, we've been working with the United Nations in refugee camp to try to improve the safety of women, for example, and children, just by providing light during the night in the refugee camps. Education, of course, same thing. As soon as you have energy, you can feed your PCs, laptop, have access to internet, and light up the classrooms, as well as access to water. It was mentioned previously, mainly through clean energy, such as water, solar pumping. Okay, so these are just examples of where we've been present in the past. Also important, I mentioned SDG number 7. In fact, SDG number 7 is indirectly impacting 13 out of the 17 SDGs defined by the United Nations. So it's quite an important one, and that's really the one we're directly impacting with this. So our challenge, and if you would ask me what is my main challenge trying to develop this access to energy, is how do we, a technology supplier like Schneider Electric, how do we make those solutions and products available to the markets that we're targeting, where basically there's not much distribution shops or even not much economy. And then the next one, and this is very much related to capacity building, is how do we make sure these products or solutions will last over time, and that the people who do operate those systems can one day recover their money and reach break-even. So that's a key thing. So in order to do this, we've consistently developed 3 main pillars to create this impact that we are trying to achieve. My main KPI at Schneider is how many people I help get access to electricity each year. So just to give you some numbers, we were able to achieve in the past 12 years a total of 30 million people impacted. We're ambitioning 50 million in 2025 and 100 million in 2030. And really it will lie in how much partnerships we'll be able to build to reconcile the fact that we need to make those products and solutions available to the people who need it. But we have also worked not only on this social business model. Why I say social is because we don't make money on this. Okay, I have a mandate to develop a business which is a social one. The gross margin we deliver is just here to compensate our own costs, but we don't do any profit. However, this is not sufficient. In fact, we realized from the beginning that we needed to increase the skills locally of those people in rural areas. So we've developed a specific program that is even more ancient than the access to energy as I'm presenting it, which is dating 2009. We actually started in 2000 to train young electricians in rural areas. We have created more than 200 schools with local entrepreneurs. And in those, let's say, 20 years, we were able to train 280,000 young electricians. Half of them had a diploma recognized by the local authorities. We're also working with the ministries of education locally in each and every country. Let's say to make it simple, half of this was made in Asia and mainly in India. The other half was spread amongst South Asia, Africa, and South America. And basically, we're aiming, again, very ambitious numbers, 500,000 electricians trained by 2025 and 1 million by 2030. Last but not least, we also are putting together 3 impact funds aiming at supporting startups in terms of the technology, the new solutions they bring to the market. Because at the end of the day, we consider we have no competitors in this space. We're all trying to achieve the same goal, which is to achieve worldwide access to energy. Okay. So basically,
Olivier, we're going to have to wrap up in
this slide.
We're going to have to wrap up in a good minute or so, Olivier. So back to you, but let's start wrapping up. Yeah, sorry.
No problem. That's fine. In fact, this is the last slide I wanted to present. Is the products and solutions that we've been able to develop to try to address this stake of access to energy. It goes from very simple solar lanterns with mobile phone charging until full-fledged microgrid systems to do, for example, rural electrification. And this is the part I wanted to focus on because we realize, according to some data from the World Bank, if you take the 4,000 projects installed, solar microgrid installed in Africa today, on average, 50% of those projects working just only 4 years after they are installed. And it's very interesting to notice that what we take for granted in countries like Europe, US, that solar is not rocket science, and as soon as you implement solar solution, it works. In emerging countries, it's not the case. And we are working with some research institutes which could understand why this is the case. First reason is a lack of skills to operate such systems. If I compare it against genset, for example, in fact, it's a little bit more, it requires specific skills to operate. The second reason is the technical choices made at the beginning, even before the project starts, such as, for example, battery technology. Take lead acid. This is not very much adapted for tropical countries versus lithium versus other types of batteries. While we develop this access to energy, that we tackle the skills available in the ground. And also we help those entrepreneurs who will later become solar installers to create their business, get the skills they need to manage their enterprise. And this is what we're trying to achieve with this training program. I think I will have to end here. I will hand over to you, David, and I hope I can continue to discuss with you guys during the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Olivier, for being with us and for this very to-the-point presentation. I think we've learned a lot, and certainly those figures are impressive, to say the least. So we'll definitely come back to that in the panel discussion in a moment. For the moment, let's go to Mrs. Diana Mbogo, the Managing Director of Millennium Engineers, also one of our newer IRE members, for her contribution. Ms. Mbogo, you have, like the other speakers, 8 minutes. At the 7th minute, there is a gong, which means 60 seconds are left. So over to you, Ms. Mbogo.
All right. Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be present today. Awesome. So I'll go straight ahead to our presentation. My name is Ms. Diana Mbogo. I am the Managing Director of Millennium Engineers Enterprises Limited. Will someone have my presentation online?
There we go.
I can't see my presentation. Okay, good. So, yes, so today I'm going to give a training on the importance of capacity building for local companies in decentralized renewable energy sector. I am one among the successors, I would say, from different capacity building trainings all over the world that has ensured my company and my staff to be able to move and acquire financing and implement renewable energy projects around Africa that are also community-based and owned as well. So I will jump straight ahead. Yes. All right.
Perfect.
All right. There is a need of capacity building in different levels. One of them is institutional capacity, where I would say we give the organization or company the capacity to handle itself. Another need is also in restructuring value systems, like values, a company values or a startup values has to align with the activities that they advocate, the activities that they do, but they also have to align with the policies of the country. They have to align with funding or financing partners and development organizations, and also align with some of their implementation partners as well. So capacity building can also be required in that area or field. And then another area that capacity building is required is in the area of human resource development, where we talk about the staff and implementation people on the ground. Most countries, I would say, in Sub-Saharan Africa lack this area most because we are more we informally understand how to implement projects and handle things, but on a formal level, we are still at a very low level. In such a way, it brings very huge problems in terms of understanding how to approach financing platforms or financing agencies or funds to actually implement our projects. It is not the fact that there aren't fundable projects, but it's the way the projects are actually aired out or represented that is in a very low level that makes the other donors or financing partners to actually feel not confident to provide financing. And then company restructuring also in understanding where skill sets are required, where we can outsource expertise, where we can actually hire or consult with other agency, more powerful agency. So these are things that most local companies are still very not knowledgeable in how to juggle up organizational structure, to understand this is an area we can, as a company, finance to have as a human resource department. This area in terms maybe of accounting skills, tax skills, management skills, administrative skills, implementation skills, technical area. So which areas should we outsource? Which areas should stay in-house? Which resources do we need? Which skills set do we need? So those are all areas that capacity building is required to actually help these companies grow from a very low level and create very impactful projects around Africa. Next slide. Okay, so as I say, there are areas such as leadership skills, business modeling, marketing, partnerships and cooperation, resources, governance, and all these areas, just to once again briefly speak about us. For example, with the area of business modeling, most companies, this is actually the core of the business or local company, where if you get your business model right, it means your revenue skills are right. And if you get your business model right, and it also means you understand the types of partnerships and collaboration you need and require at that time. And it also helps you in planning in terms of marketing. And this also assists you in terms of funds mobilization. This is where we talk about resources. And trainings and capacity building in these areas are really of high importance because it assists in different areas in shaping and helping that company actually grow and understand their internal issues and the external issues, as well as understand how to move from this stage to be able to be recognized, understood, and align their values and activities to those that are actually required in their area and needed in their specific countries. Yeah, thank you. Capacity building can also be heads-on, divided into levels, which goes from individual levels. Here I talk about startups, especially the senior management, directors and founders. These people require intensive skills management because handling a startup is like handling many departments of a company at the same time. And it's usually 2 or 3 people, the founders or directors, trying to juggle up everything at the same time. So I will give a personal experience of myself where between 2016 and 2018, I was highly just acquiring individual level skill set and knowledge, attending conferences, attending trainings all over the world that helped me understand language, the business language. I come from an engineering background. I have a Bachelor of Mechanical Engineering. So understanding the business side took me a while, but I needed that to start understanding how business languages are, how Europeans speak is different from how Americans speak, and it's very different from how the Western countries speak and how they do business. So European, it's easier, or Americans is a little bit different, and then the Western ones are different. So this is all very important in understanding the type of partnerships, how to maintain these partnerships, how to acquire funds from different continents, and then be able to also manage them. And then this is where I go to organizational level, where we talk about the skill set that the entire startup has. How many skills, what skills do we already have that are strong, which ones are weak, and which ones do we actually lack? So this is areas also where it is required to look through it and see which areas can actually be on an individual level, organization level. And then when I talk about the system level, this is a place I think that is not highly touched or considered. Because
60 seconds. Sorry.
Okay.
So let's go ahead. No,
right,
go ahead.
so
I love the passion,
level,
but they're signaling me to keep it to another minute, please. Thank you so much.
All right. So the system level is where a company or a startup is working with a multitude of partners. So it is, for example, I'll give it an example of ourselves. We have 2 financing partners. At the same time, we have 3 implementation partners. So how we handle our financing partners is different from how we handle our implementation partners. So that is a system level organization. How do we keep 5 different partners in one place to achieve one goal? So next slide. Yes, so this is exactly what I was saying. Assessing, benchmarking, the capacity areas of capacity building, creating an action plan, providing the business capacity building to the local company, and then finally reassessing, evaluating, unlearning, and relearning again what is required. And then finally, so capacity building can be provided to private companies, foundations, development agencies, and ministries. They all require capacity building because every level needs to work with the other one. Ministries needs to work with development agency needs to work with foundations also need to work with the private companies or NGOs. And this is mostly the same thing. Capacity building helps in minimizing over-reliance in outside experts, foster a sense of ownership and empowerment for the team, for the company, strengthen confidence, skills, knowledge, and resources. And then finally, these are some of the companies or foundations and areas we acquired skill set over the years. Alliance for Rural Electrification, EEP Africa, Stitching Doan, GIZ, United Nations Environment Program, the Tony Lumelu Foundation, Mandela Washington Fellowship, Invest to Impact, EOGSEA, and / Global Impact Acceleration Program. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Mbogo, for your contribution. You may have seen me, I don't know if the speakers can see me, I've been scribbling away at a lot of the things you mentioned. We'll definitely come back to that in the Q&A. And also thanks for the shout out at the end, that always makes our team happy, of course, as well. Without further ado, Mr. Felix Bolt of SolarWorks, I don't know if you are on the line. You are physically on the line. Welcome, Felix. Yeah. Please, join us.
I couldn't leave you alone there.
No, I'm very happy that you are here. Please, the floor is yours.
Right. Yeah, great. I'm Felix Bolt, CEO of SolarWorks. Today, it's about capacity building. But before, I want to give you an introduction on SolarWorks. And then along a project that we have just implemented in Zambia, I want to give you an introduction what it means for us to do capacity building in Africa. So we are SolarWorks, we are a manufacturer of solar off-grid products, mostly solar home systems, but we are now also transitioning into what we call DC, decentralized solar mini-grids. So it's an interconnection of solar home system with a small device of ours that we manufacture and that allows us to interconnect our solar home system and those of others. But to date, we have around electrified 10,000 people with our solar home systems. We are working on a B2B basis, selling to distribution partners across Africa. And we're around about 10 employees, and half of our staff is actually situated in Africa. So what actually is happening in the market right now is that we see solar home system and AC mini grids on the other side. Those are really the two solutions that can go into the market. And we try to make the best out of two worlds, what we call the mesh, in order to, bring benefits from both worlds into one device or in one solution, basically. And the good side of the solar home system is they're pretty cheap, but they lag slightly behind in terms of how much power they can provide to the customer. And then there's AC mini grids, which are, of course, great. They give you a very high tier 5 electrification, but they're pretty expensive, like $1,000 per connection are pretty common. Actually, there was a picture missing here that should be an AC mini grid there where the black stuff is. So we say SHS, solar home systems, and grid equals mesh, and mesh is the interconnection of devices. And it's a decentralized bottom-up interconnection. Now, how does it work? Solar home systems, typically 12-volt, 24-volt system. You can boost that voltage up to 72 volts. You distribute that on a power line, DC, within a village. And energy can freely flow between households. They can be feeding in or taking out energy. So there are consumers and prosumers. People who are feeding in, making money. People taking energy out have to pay for the electricity. Simple as that. So the business model is for that particular mesh is pretty straightforward. So people have to pay for electricity or take it out. And the distributor, from the difference of the two prices, makes the money and amortizes the grid. Now, what does it mean in terms of capacity building to make something like this happen, especially with a lot of staff in Africa, distributors in Africa? And here are a couple of examples. First of all, we like to believe that it is a silly approach to say we here in Germany, we're sitting at our headquarters in Berlin, we can decide what Africa needs. I think solutions for Africa should come from Africa. So that's why most of our R&D team is based in Cameroon and in Zambia, currently developing solutions basically in front of their doorsteps and implementing immediate changes in firmware, back-end, front-end, and so forth. So, of course, it requires capacity to train them, and now they're really up to speed and doing a great job. Capacity building also means abstracting from visualizing what we want to do, using tools to plan how to implement mini-grids like this. So that's an example of our grid in Zambia. That's actually what's in the field right now. Interconnected solar home systems. At this point in time, as we talk, it's 25 households connected to each other. You can see the red dots are the consumers, and the blue dots, you can see the small solar panels on the houses. Those are the prosumers feeding the grid with their excess energy. That's actually how the installation looked like. Of course, it also required training and installation and installing diligently, so we don't have a lot of short circuits on the line, or we don't have any loose connections on the poles. That's very, very critical. Now it also means community sanitization and sensitization in terms of getting everyone on board, making them understand how it works, and of course asking if they even want to be connected. Maybe not everyone wants to be connected to a solar grid, and also taking away fears from the local community. If they feed in their excess energy from their own solar home system, maybe we are stealing all their energy and selling it to the neighbors. Not quite like that, but it takes some convincing job in the beginning. And now we have a really good feedback from the community there. It's actually a village of 300 houses, out of which 25 are now interconnected. And now everyone already came, and after seeing, oh, it works, and it doesn't destroy my battery, we also want to be connected. Just another example of how the training in the village actually looks like. It also requires end customer training of how to trade the energy. That's our meter you can see. That's metering, net metering for energy in, energy out. And of course, it requires end customer training to understand what's happening, how they can sell their energy via the meter or via a mobile phone app. We also need to, as I said, we're working B2B. We are the technology provider, but this is run by distributors of ours. Like in Zambia, it's Little Sun Zambia Limited, distributing for us and running the grid. And it requires training on the front end because all our devices are remote monitored, so they need to understand how to interpret the data, how to understand if a solar home system falls short on power or if there's excess energy that could be shared. All this needs to be understood. And it also, again, needs some level of abstraction from looking at the physical system in front of you and abstracting the data that you see on a computer. It is sometimes quite a hard job to do. That shows, again, it's an example of our monitoring of our front end for the net metering of our mesh. And again, it requires that training to understand how the net metering data is to be interpreted. And on the last thing that requires a lot of capacity building is the regulatory side of things. In Zambia, the people or the organizations and ministries we need to talk to is the Energy Regulation Board, the Rural Electrification Agency, and the Ministry of Energy. And I was fairly surprised that despite we are the only ones in the country providing a DC mini-grid of that type, there were already regulations in place which perfectly fitted our niche, which is a 45 to 72 volt grid that can be built in Zambia and falls under a certain category of the regulations. But nonetheless, you have to get the regulators on board. You have to build capacity to make them understand how that all works. Maybe also to work together with them and define the regulations, because currently they're not properly outlined. So they're pretty vague, and I think there needs to be a lot more work done until this can be called a proper regulation. Yeah, I think that's the last slide. Thanks very much. And
awesome. Thank you so much for a very good presentation. Please feel if you would like to join.
1.5 meters.
1.5 meters, and then I'm not so alone. So it's very good. Sorry, I didn't know you were here in the audience. So I'm very happy that you made it. And thank you for your inspiring presentation. Also here, I've been taking a lot of notes because, as these conferences go, not only is it important to show the solutions that you have, but also to inspire us as a business association, our partners in the public sector, to continue to work together and develop programs, build that capacity on the regulatory framework. Like with UNIDO, we made template laws for mini-grids and so on. So anyway, but we'll come back to that in the panel discussion. Thank you for being here. So now we go to our next speaker, who is, in an unusual twist at the Decentralized Renewable Energy Conference, a deputy mayor, Mr. Günther Mögele, the deputy mayor of Wilpolsried. Ich hoffe, dass ich das nicht so schlecht sage, und ich lasse Sie die floor. The floor is yours, Mr. Mögele. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much, David. No, you said it very well. Thanks a lot for the introduction. Can I have my presentation, please? Just start with the first slide. Okay. Yeah. Here you can see a nice view on our, meanwhile, quite famous energy village. And well, as you explained, my name is Günther Mögele. I'm village council of that beautiful village since 1919 and deputy mayor since 1996. And while what is special in our village, we started more than 20 years ago with renewable energies and also, well, for sure, with capacity building. And therefore, I would like to explain you how it worked in the last 20 years in our village. And maybe I'm quite sure there are some maybe interesting points for you and some parallels in African countries, what you maybe could be able to copy. In the next slide, you can see an overview of our system. 20 years ago, we decided to produce renewable energy in all possible kinds. And meanwhile, well, we have the 4 possibilities like hydropower, biomass, wind energy, and PV power. And we added gear number 5, we call it local resources, what is also very, very important for us, not only for energy production, but also for all kinds of constructions. We try to use our local resources and materials. Then after some years, big companies like Siemens came to us and said to us, hey guys, you have a system in your small village, which we probably will have in Germany and Europe, maybe 20 or 30 years. And therefore it was ideal for those companies and also our energy providers to test new technologies like smart grid technologies, but also all kind of storage systems. And therefore, we are involved in different kind of research projects in the last 10 years. And meanwhile, you see the red gear on the bottom of the slide. Meanwhile, we are really active in energy education. We have our own ecological education center, and we are also offering educations for African countries. I will explain it later, but maybe you can already remember the website. It's called VET for Africa, VET for Africa, one word.com. And there you can check what we are doing. We are offering a training for trainers system, especially on PV technologies. So how did the capacity building work in our country? I already mentioned that we started 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, most of the technologies were not known, were new. And we really had to do some pioneer work. And most of it was learning by doing, definitely, because nobody knew how PV panels would work or wind power would work or biogas or anything else. And we were really lucky to have some really engaged farmers together. Well, we were just a small group with these farmers. We just tried it. We started 20 years ago. We didn't know how to produce renewable energy, what would be the best technology. And therefore, well, we tried to gain experience and just started. What was very, very important for us, I go back to the last slide, you can see the yellow here in the middle, what was from the beginning on the citizens' participation. So we tried to participate, to involve our inhabitants, and especially inhabitants from the village, and only inhabitants from the village. Our village has around about 2,600 inhabitants. And these inhabitants, meanwhile, invested more than 50 million euros. 50 million euros is a huge amount for a small village. It's private money. And we don't have big investors, no big companies, or even the community is not investing in these technologies. It's all private money from farmers, from totally normal people. And that was very, very important to get those people, so I would say, into the boat, to get them involved, and also to get the acceptance, what is not so easy, especially acceptance for wind turbines and stuff like that in Germany. And then after some years, for sure, we needed the support of some specialists and suitable companies. We collected experiences over years. and we developed our own skills and our own knowledge. And meanwhile, I think, well, for us, it's the highest level of learning is teaching. So that's what we are doing in the moment. We offer a lot of special training courses in our ecological education system, especially the one which I already mentioned, called WET for Africa. Some examples, what we are doing. In our case, my village is in the very south of Germany, and well, also in the moment it's quite cold. We need most of our energy. We need is for producing heat. We need around about 5 times more energy to heat our houses than for electricity. So that's our biggest energy consumer. Meanwhile, we are able to produce around about 60% in a renewable mixture, what you can see here with biogas, that's the biggest part, and all kind of wood chips, pellets, logs, and so on, solar thermal systems, geothermal systems, also PTH means power to heat. What means we also use our PV panels to produce, especially meanwhile where the feed-in tariffs are very low in our country meanwhile. So here a picture where you can see how it works. We have one big biogas plant which produces enough biogas to run meanwhile 10 of these CHPs, which you see on the right-hand side in the middle picture. These are, well, just changed diesel engines, V8 diesel engines, CHPs, combined heat and power. I can hear the gong, yes. And we also have a village heating system with pellets. And the next slide, you can see our electrical energy production. You can see we produce 8 times more renewable energy than the whole village needs in a quite nice mixture.
Right.
But the best thing is that we can prove that this is an example for our research projects. We can prove, if you like, you can go to this website. It's called pebbles.fit, fraunhofer.de. Just Google for Pebbles FIT. And then you will see a slide like that, where it's a real-time system, where you can have a look on it, how it works, how the mixture is. This was 1 month ago. We produced 30 times more energy than we need in a mixture of wind, PV power, and biogas power. And on the right-hand side, you can see the ups and downs. And it's changing every minute. And that's the challenge of renewable energy. Also for us, that was also part of our capacity building that we had to learn. The main problem is not to produce the energy. The main problem is, meanwhile, to keep the grid stable and to cut the peaks and to always have more than 100%. And that's what we can prove with that system. We have always, even during the night when there is no wind and no sun at all, and we still have more than 100% with our biomass. So that's our education center. Time is over. Thanks a lot for your attention. And if you are interested, you can just go to our website, the wilpolstreet.de, to get more information. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mögele, for this very nice presentation. Love the picture, by the way, of the cow in the field with the solar panels, and then the astonishing production of electricity and energy that you have in the village compared to the needs, making you 8 times over a net exporter of power. So yes, I imagine grid stability is an issue, but it's one that is manageable. So this is really big congratulations on this achievement, and inspiring to learn from. We'll come back to that in a moment, but I will go now to our last panelist, which is Mrs. Laura Corcoran, the Director of Business Development at AppTech Africa, also one of our ARE members. Laura, the floor is yours. There you are, all the way from the US today?
I'm actually in Uganda.
Excuse me? In London?
I'm in Uganda.
In Uganda. Uganda. From Uganda to Augsburg. Here we go. Over to you.
Okay, thanks so much. Thanks so much, and hello everybody. Thanks for having me today. My name is Laura Corcoran. I'm Director of Business Development with a company called AppTech Africa. Abtech Africa is an EPC solar and water pumping company. We got our start in Eritrea in 2006, moved to South Sudan in 2011, and we're operating across 7 countries in Africa, including Central African Republic, Sierra Leone, Liberia, DRC, Niger, and we're headquartered here in Uganda. We have a reputation within the industry for completing quality projects in frontier markets where it's quite difficult to operate. I see my slideshow is not advancing and I'm pressing the button. I don't know if a technical person can give a little assistance.
It is. Okay. There's a bit of a lag.
Oh, okay,
go ahead.
Okay, there's a bit of a lag. All right, okay, thanks. Yeah, so I'm so thankful that ARE asked me to speak today. My background's actually in development and nursing. So I've been 10 years in Uganda, 5 years in the renewable energy sector. But before that, I spent 15 years in education, and that really colors the way that I approach this sector and the way that I handle things. So like a lot of small companies, when I first joined Abtech, we had around 30 employees, and the HR department, the admin departments, they weren't well structured. So a lot of the work that I've done has been in developing those areas. And today I'm going to be talking a lot about technical capacity building issues, but from the beginning, I want to emphasize that capacity building isn't just needed for technical staff, it's needed for all departments for African businesses to become finance ready. So these renewable energy projects that we're all developing and implementing in Africa, they are simply not sustainable without African companies. And these companies need financing just like any other business. And historically, it's been very difficult for African companies to access finance. And this is partly due to the lack of capacity. So as ARE has said, 70% of DRE companies report that they have difficulty finding quality local staff. Just to dive into that a little more, there are a lot of gaps that we as a company see. There's gaps in knowing best installation practices. This can be with wiring, care for roof-mounted systems. There's a lack of product knowledge, especially when it comes to quality products. A lot of the products you'll see out there on the market are not quality, so technical staff might not know how to operate them. We see a real lack of knowledge when it comes to sizing systems. A lot of times systems are sized too small, or people don't know how to do it when it comes to more complex systems like hybrid systems. Many local workers won't have experience with certain technologies such as lithium-ion batteries that are a little more rare on the market, or they won't have experience with remote monitoring systems that are more complex. Local workers need a lot of soft skills development for documentation, for reporting, and some of them might not have the latest knowledge on market trends and technology. And like I said, support staff, they also need capacity building. So much of the impact data that investors are looking for is not tracked in a lot of African companies. The policies and procedures that companies need to have in place for operations and for due diligence are not in place. Skills with financial analysis, projections, all of these are things that African companies working in the DRE space need to have capacity building in. And this was mentioned earlier, but these issues are often compounded by a lack of regulation at the local and national level. So some of the countries where we operate, they completely lack any regulatory framework. Some other countries are just now coming up with installation guidelines. The lack of these guidelines can affect the quality of the training programs that these workers are completing. So lack of regulation also comes into effect when you see the quality of the products that are available on the local market, and that was brought up earlier as well. Other aspects we might consider and take for granted are safety and environmental issues. So many local staff, they won't have a lot of experience with safety and environmental risk assessment or mitigation measures. Staff, they need to be trained in health and safety. They need to be trained to use the PPA that they're given. They need additional training in first aid, COVID, standard operating procedures, HIV/AIDS prevention, all of that. We have to cover all of that when we do training. We need to make sure local workers conduct and understand the importance of environmental impact assessments and to have waste disposal measurements in place for projects. And why is this so important? So why are we all here today talking about this? So having competent local workers in place is critical for the sustainability of DRE projects. There's really 2 types of trainings that we look at. Of course, we need to work on training our off-takers, our beneficiaries, our clients who are using the systems. They need to understand basic maintenance. They need to understand when to reach out for more assistance. And then, of course, we also need to be training local technical staff on the ground. They need to be able to service these systems in case anything goes wrong. They have to have spare parts available. No matter what we're doing, you need local presence to some degree to ensure that projects that are being implemented in Africa are successful. So how do we as AppTech approach these challenges to make sure we have quality staff? First of all, we recognize that anybody who joins our team, they need training, no matter how experienced they are. Secondly, we invest. So we have both internal and external trainings. We give time and we give resources to it. Before we send our teams to the field, we ensure they have both theoretical and practical training. We include soft skills training. And equally as important, we train our employees to put in structures to retain these employees. So, once we've invested so much in training these employees, we have to retain them to strengthen our company. Trainings are ongoing, and we're always surveying our team to identify our training gaps. We have to make sure our team is properly supervised when they're on the field. We use curriculums for our clients to make sure that they understand the systems that they're receiving with basic maintenance and operation. This has also come up earlier, but there's some really good organizations out there doing capacity building already. And Light Institute is one that's found in Uganda. They do customized solar trainings. GIZ holds capacity building trainings. Uganda Solar Energy Association, Global Green Group, and also ARE. You guys have done really great programs, especially with the Investment Academy that you ran this year. And then finally, I want to emphasize that there is a wealth of knowledge and critical information in the communities where we are implementing these projects and amongst the local workers where we're training. We have to tailor our trainings to take cultural and gender issues into consideration. For example, make sure trainings are in the right language, make sure they're including women, and we have to learn from our history. There are a lot of DRE projects out there that have not been sustainable and failed. There's some solar projects in Africa that are no longer functioning because there's no local staff available to service the systems. So we have to look at the reasons for this. It's expensive and logistically challenging to expect expats to travel to Africa to service local projects. So we need to be reaching out to local communities and taking into consideration their input to have success with our DRE projects. Also, again, it's so important to not forget about other capacity building that's needed outside of just technical workers. African companies need capacity building in financial and administrative departments so they can unlock renewable energy capital. This is critical to supporting Africans' workforce to solve Africa's energy challenges. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Laura, for your excellent intervention as well. Really, I'm really impressed by the level that we can bring to the audience here today. Of course, with our distinguished panel, and indeed a live intervention from Uganda, as we mentioned, to Augsburg, on the experiences in the field and the need for partnerships and the need for these community-driven DRE projects. I think that's really the nexus or the essence of what we're getting at, and also here with the GB collaboration that we have set up. So perhaps we can go to just a neutral background or just to the first slide of today. We have taken a little bit more time than expected, but there's still some room for the Q&A. So here in the audience, I don't know if there is somebody who might have a question also online. As we mentioned, if you're following this from your home office or your home couch, who knows, then feel free to put your question in the Slido. It'll pop here on our end. Yeah, and so between the offline and the online world, I guess there will be the one or the other question coming up sometime soon. So who's gonna take the bait? Who's gonna be the brave one starting this conversation? Very good, thank you, sir. For or was that accidental? Yeah. Please, over to you. Maybe introduce your name, your company, or your organization, and then your question, as well as to who you address it.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alikyan. I'm from the University of Oldenburg, doing my master's in renewable energy. My question is addressed to Mr. Günther Mögele, if I'm saying the name right. He said that there was an investment of 5 million for the renewables in his village, and there were around 2,500 members. That's around 20,000 euros per person.
Yeah.
How did he manage to convince the household of 2 people, that's 40,000 per household, to invest in something invest 40,000 euros in the community. Like, was that a challenge, or I don't know, how did he do that?
Thank you for that question. I think that's an excellent question, and I also struck note down that figure. Perhaps we take a second one, and then we move to the floor. Anybody else or online? I mean, maybe I'm not seeing it online, but is there another question from the floor at this point, or shall we go to Wilpol Street? We go to Wilpol Street. Okay, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I don't know if you understood the question, but if you allow me to rephrase it, how on earth did you convince your citizens to invest that much money in your energy village? It's an astonishing achievement. How did you do it?
Well, thanks for the question. First of all, I have to correct it. It was 50 million, not 5 million, 50 million euros. So even a huger amount of money. Well, we started 20 years ago, and 20 years ago, we started first of all with small projects and small amounts. And then people realized that it works. And that's the most important thing. We have a lot of engaged people, but well, actually, we're a totally normal village, but not many rich people. And so the challenge is to convince those people that it works. Well, the best way it works is to show it. First of all, the principle was always the same. We tried to, for example, PV panels. We covered all public buildings. And then we allowed people to participate and to invest their private money. And then people realized that it works in both ways, what means not only ecological, but also economical. And the economical way is very, very important, but means, meanwhile, people know that it's one of the best investments you can make. For example, wind power. The wind turbines really work in a very, very good and functioning way. We have the time for return on invest is around about 10 years. And then most people receive between, I would say, 10 and 15% of refund from their invest. And a wind turbine we calculate a wind turbine for 30 or 40 years. So it's really also a good investment. But the most difficult thing is to convince people and to prove it. So it's a matter of confidence.
Yeah, well, that is indeed still 50 million euros, quite a figure. And indeed, I think you heard it, it's a question of self-consumption, also the avoided costs of paying. You need to pay the bill anyway, so in this way, it's an investment rather than an ongoing expense, much like you can almost compare it actually to buying a house instead of renting it. In that sense, and 10-15%, that is a pretty steep ROI after just 10 years of payback. Excellent. Do we have another question now that the top is taken off? The gentleman in the back, please. We have all our panelists online. One is being very discreet there with the black screen, but the rest we have.
Good afternoon. My name is Steven Pema. I'm a business development officer at the Rural and Renewable Energy Agency in Liberia, West Africa. My question goes to Mr. Bolt from SolarWorks. I understand from the presentation that the average connection cost for the AC mini grids is around $1,000. So usually one of the huge challenges for markets in Africa is the affordability. So how do you solve this affordability problem with a connection cost around $1,000?
Yeah, so I think it's a very valid and probably the most important question, because that's the very reason why we do this. Well, you can say that a lot of households have already been investing into solar home systems. Many distributors, drop solar home systems in the rural areas. So all this effort is great, and we can see from the data of our system that there is a lot of excess energy. So we sort of to a certain extent can take the solar home system and PV cost for granted in a certain way, because it's often already in the village, So what we do is we drop the cost of connection to around $100 instead of $1,000, because what we need to provide is the metering box, the transmission line, the poles, and some civil engineering around that. And in Zambia, we even had a very strong community involvement in a way that to say, if you want to be connected, you could even get involved yourself in erecting the pole, for instance. So you have a civil engineer going around the village, putting up little flags where the poles should be in terms of distances that needs to be established between the houses, and then digging up the holes for the poles, doing the civil engineering, the excavation and so on, can be even community-driven. That's what we found in Zambia. And it's working surprisingly well. So those two aspects of being within the community, with the community, and being decentralized allows us to drop the cost significantly. Also imagine if you have an AC mini-grid, or let alone a grid extension from the utility, but let's say an AC mini-grid, you still can say it's an off-grid system, yes, but it is outside of the village. It's a centralized system from a village perspective. And so it's outside of the village with a larger PV field. You have to run transmission lines quite a distance into the center of the village where usually the largest anchor loads are. So we don't have that problem. We can literally start integrating 2 connections and we can go up to 50 or 100. There is no limitation in that, and it can grow gradually. So you're not encountering this big upfront cost of, let's say, you have a 100 or 200 kilowatt mini-grid. Your installation or your investment cost initially is probably around $150,000, $250,000, right? But here you can make your choice. You can say, let's see how that works in this community. Let's start with 50 households or 20. Start small, grow it gradually and organically. That's the approach that we are going.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much indeed for that answer. Indeed, time flies, but I think we can just squeeze in maybe 1 or a maximum 2 final questions if there's any burning ones for our panelists. No, I think in the audience everybody's quite happy with these masterful interventions. I don't know if online there are a few. I think online they have a bit of trouble getting through. Well, I have, then I take the opportunity. This is the privilege of the moderator. You know, I hear a lot in the different presentations that one of the issues is regulation. Let's put it in that frame, in that back bucket. We have the pleasure of having 3 out of the 6 people on the screen are on the public sector side in Germany. How have you done that on the German side? How have you, let's say, motivated these sort of projects like we see in the Energy Village in Wilpolsried? Is it primarily an economic story? Was there a regulatory incentive? Was it facilitating partnerships? Yeah, maybe Mrs. Heun or Mrs. Otremba particularly, perhaps you have a view. I don't want to put you on the spot. I can, but it would be interesting.
Yes, thank you. Maybe I can answer. We started 20 years ago. There were parliamentarians from the German Bundestag and even parliamentarians from different parties. And we decided to support renewables. And we said we would like to give the production of the energy in the hand of the people. So, and that means we said, first, they must have access to the grid. That means when they are producing energy, the energy supplier has to buy the energy what the households are producing. That was the first guarantee. And the second guarantee was that the producer got for 20 years a special income, a tariff for every kilowatt hour he is putting to the grid. And that means he could go to the bank and ask for loans because he had the guarantee for 20 years income. And that we had such a big dynamic. We call that a Renewable Energy Source Act, and that is copied more than 100 times in the whole world because it was so successful. And I think that was the political will. Most important is the political will, because in some governments we see that the governments are more interested in big energy suppliers, in the national grid, in big investments. And what we are doing is to invest in decentralized solutions. And I think that is so important that we convince the governments that that is the best for the population. because you are creating so many jobs, you are creating so many income, and it is really a development for rural areas.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hearn. Indeed, it's essential to, if I take the example even of my own country, Belgium, it's also a similar story that really kick-started that market, and what you've mentioned, I think, is very relevant. In some countries, we also observe with DRE, of course, that big investments are always welcome in the big grids, and they are necessary, for sure. But in the off-grid sector in particular, I think the saying 1 + 1 is more than 2 is true. It's not about the one big thing that may or may not happen, but it's about thousands of smaller, actually much more achievable in the short-term things that have a quick impact in a matter of weeks, in a matter of months, as we experience from our own members. Perhaps I turn to the conclusion, because I think that in 1 minute or so we need to turn off for the next panel. So, how to summarize such a rich discussion? I'm not alone on the stage, so perhaps my colleague here will help me. I think if I look at where we started with the needs that Mrs. Hearn identified, the different, let's say, speeches we have heard, PowerPoints we have seen from really on the ground in Germany, on the ground in Uganda and Eritrea and all the countries that you mentioned, Laura. Well, obviously all the countries where Schneider is active, which is everywhere. I noted all the investments you made. What was it? 30% of income goes to inefficient and dangerous solutions. You see, that's I think an area where, if I try and summarize it all together, we have still a job to do as the off-grid, as the renewable energy sector. We are obviously convinced. We know the value of this solution, but we need to perhaps go even more out into the world, go to the regulators, go to the field to build that training, go excuse me, to the let's say, universities and schools at the national level to build that capacity, because we hear the needs are technical, they are financial structuring, they are managerial, they're regulation-wise. And so they're really, so it's not, people often say, you know, when you've been a few years in the sector, capacity building is important, it becomes a boutade. It's not a boutade, it's absolutely essential, and it comes in so many shapes and forms. But what I hear from today, if I see the growth of these companies, the successes that you have in villages such as Wilpolsried, such as across Africa, we'll have a number of case studies in our upcoming publication with Grüne Burger Energie as well. It inspires hope. It inspires really trust and confidence in the future. And we see, to end on a positive note, that talking about regulation, there are quite a few countries now in Africa that are really leading the way in progressive mini-grid regulation, without which it's just not going to happen, or at least not in the right way. We see that the technology is, there's a question of technology transfer, but there's also much more homegrown technology, certainly with off-grid products. It's like with mobile banking, it addresses a concrete need of today. And so thereby, the final thing I'll say is it demonstrates again the necessity, at the risk of sounding cliche, of the partnerships that we make between local government, international actors, national actors, same with the private sector, as ARE try to have very large companies like Schneider Electric, to companies like Aptec Africa, to companies like Millennium Engineers, to Solar Works. So really a diverse bunch of stakeholders, because we need each and every one of these, the actors of this ecosystem, to actually meet the goals of clean energy transition as well as energy access. And so on that positive note, I thank you so much, dear audience, for your participation today, also online. And I invite you to join the next session. Thank you. A big applause for our speakers today. Thank you.